Good morning, everybody. Good morning, and welcome to TradeWinds Shipowner Forum, Singapore 2025. Great pleasure to be here. My name is Craig Eason. I am your host for today. I'm one of the editors at TradeWinds, so it's a great pleasure for me to be here in Singapore. And together with my colleague Jonathan, we're going to hopefully build up a program for you over the course of today that's going to show you some of the developments that we see within the industry. There are certain topics that I'm sure you're expecting to hear about, and there are topics galore that we could discuss. We could basically create a conference all day, all week, couldn't we, on some of the topics that we've got crashing over the industry at the moment. But more about that and the specific themes in a little bit. I just wanted to do a couple of sort of house rules for you, if I may, just make sure that you're all comfortable with what's going on. There are no fire drills today, so if you do hear a fire alarm, run for your lives. The exits are there. You can see all the green signs there. I'd like also to thank all of our sponsors. These shipowner forums that we are now hosting around the world, they're gaining great traction. And it's so impressive to see so many people come to event here in Singapore today. Last week we had one in Shanghai, and that was equally well attended. And the discussions were really good there as well. So it's great to have the support of our sponsors for these events. And just finally, I just want to come on to talk about the app. This is something for you that we've got. So if you go in, you can find there. If you've wondered why you've got a QR code, it's up there as well. Use that QR code and you can go and download the TradeWinds Events app. And you put in your email address. You should all have got an email, by the way, last week or even yesterday with all the details. Put in your email and the password. You'll have been sent, but it's Singapore 2025. And there you'll get the agenda. You'll be able to see who the delegates are. You can contact with them. You connect with them, find them. But also for me as well, this is quite helpful because there's a Q&A part within that app. And that's good if you want to ask questions when we come to the panels. We've got a number of panels during the course of today, and it's really helpful. And it's your way of being engaged with this event. You know, it's not just about me and Jonathan being stood on the stage and doing what we do best, which is interview people and talk to people, but it gives you a part of being part of this dialogue during the course of today as well. So that's it for the house rules. We've got a tight, very packed agenda during the course of today with these panel sessions that Jonathan and I are going to be hosting. But it now gives me great pleasure to introduce Christopher Wiernicki, Chairman and CEO of ABS, to do a keynote speech today, because he's going to be able to launch things off and get us going in a good way to discuss everything that we need to discuss. So, Christopher, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Good morning. Happy birthday, Singapore. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak with you today and to share some thoughts. It is actually great to be back in Singapore, a place where we have so many friends and clients for this annual gathering of our industry. And I think over the last several days, I think it's probably safe to say that we are all learning about the guiding principle of embracing change and making uncertainty our friend. Throughout Singapore Maritime Week, we will hear a lot, many discussions about technologies and the vessels, the fuels and the geopolitics, and the other significant drivers of all the rapid change of our industry. But I think you can expect probably to hear precious little about probably the most important topic and the most important element of all, which is people. Because it's the people that are going to be the real heroes. And it's the people that we need to talk about, because we are going to be expecting a lot for them to be able to operate amidst all this disruption that we are talking about. And it is something ABS has long been focusing on, along with the MPA, which is why this week we are launching the ABS Singapore Maritime Safety Center. It's a cutting-edge facility, I'll talk a little bit about that, designed to provide really truly immersive training for seafarers and maritime professionals in a wide range of areas, quite frankly, ranging from everything from handling different types of fuels to looking at crisis management, to looking at data-driven decision-making, to even be able to understand and manage safety zones on board ship or in the port. And it's in the support of the MPA's Maritime Energy Training Facility, and it is really the one way I think that we can all work together moving forward to address the biggest challenge of all, which is ensuring we have a workforce that is equipped with the skills to safely operate the vessels and equipment we are all busy developing and, quite frankly, going to be talking about, I suspect, over the course of today and the rest of the conference. To see what I mean, let's consider the scale of the problem that is in front of us. You know, the maritime industry is really in the early innings of a decade of change, marked by new drivers, new boundary conditions, such as safety, really trying to understand the unintended safety consequences of change, trying to understand the availability, scalability, and affordability of fuel, trying to get our arms around the infrastructure that is going to support this, as well as new global shipping shapers. And you know, they fall in three categories: geopolitical turbulence, the regulatory framework environment, and obviously the technology readiness timelines of the key technologies that are coming in front of us. These key transformational readiness timelines are actually derived from the rapid technology-driven change we are seeing unfold at an unprecedented pace all over the world. This amounts to essentially a fifth industrial revolution at sea, with data, AI, autonomy, electrification, and new fuels shaping the future direction of designs and operations. We know the bookends in terms of fuels. The short game is conventional fuel and LNG gas, with data-driven optimization and emerging energy efficiency technologies. The mid-game, which quite honestly is going to be driven a lot by the upcoming IMO decisions, looks like a mix of biofuels, methanol and ammonia, along with electrification and carbon capture. And the long game, I will say boldly, is increasingly looking more like nuclear. But just think about what all this means in terms of the development pathways for seafarers who have to operate in all these environments, have to be able to handle dynamic versus static fuels, advanced electrification systems, innovative powertrains, active energy efficiency devices, carbon capture systems, the toxicity challenge of ammonia, and ultimately, perhaps, nuclear propulsion. And oh, by the way, if I throw into this the greater use of cyber-enabled physical systems, more focus on autonomy and AI, if we're not careful, we are going to have seafarer cognitive overload. And yet our industry typically views crews with a 20th century mindset and approaches their challenges with 20th century attitudes, while at the same time saddling them with the burdens and the responsibilities of 21st century technologies. You see, for all that we focus on technology, this is principally going to be a story about people. Our seafarers will in fact be the critical factor in all this, and we must start getting them ready now. Safety going forward is not going to be defined as just the absence of accidents, but as a new equation of capacity and capability over demand, intended to recognize the unintended safety consequences of change. This new safety equation in the numerator is going to have an understanding of human-centric systems times well-trained and skilled people times a percentage use of data and digital technology. This represents capacity and capability. Demand is in the denominator, representing the complexity of an evolving decarbonization trajectory and rapidly changing technology environment. So as you break this equation down, you will see the greater percentage of digital, the better the learning of people, and the greater the awareness of the systems, including shipboard systems that are human-centric and, in fact, their interconnectivity, the greater the safety. Conversely, the greater the demand, the lower the level of safety. So quite frankly, we should be investing and paying as much attention to the next generation safety learning environments for our seafarers as we are to the next generation of fuels. Let me repeat that. Quite frankly, we should be investing and paying as much attention to the next generation safety learning environments for our seafarers as we are to the next generation of fuels. Our approach to safety, our understanding of the changing dynamics and their impacts on safety, and our commitment to a new generation of safety learning will be the real enabler of our maritime industry as it collectively adjusts to change and brings the maritime industry together in terms of relationships, both public and private, charterer and owner, shipbuilder and equipment manufacturers, regulators and class, and yes, even the ship and the port. This is because safety is all about having the right collective behavior, not just the right individual behavior, which is an important reminder, I think, for all of us that safety is really a team sport and a shared responsibility. So with this in mind, ABS, where safety excellence is the bedrock of our brand and the reason why we all get out of bed in the morning, along with the MPA, have developed a shared vision of how to train tomorrow's seafarers. And so the ABS Singapore Maritime Safety Center is designed to lead the industry in its approach to delivering next-generation skills. This world-class, technologically cutting-edge facility located here in Singapore will be where the changing dimensions of safety will meet the next generations of learning. This center is going to employ the latest training techniques, including virtual reality and game-based training systems, and will use advanced technology to simulate realistic training scenarios with varying levels of complexity without putting the vessel or crew at risk. In this sandbox, Singapore maritime professionals and students will have the opportunity to learn and acquire skills in the safe handling of alternative fuels, such as ammonia and methanol, as well as the deployment of battery and electric propulsion systems, amongst many more. An example is going to be the new ABS Metaship fleet, the ABS Spirit, the ABS Eagle, and the ABS Integrity. These metaships are a one-of-a-kind, highly realistic, virtual asset built to scale from vessel drawings. They take learners on virtual field trips, providing a very powerful, immersive learning experience in a simulated training environment based on gaming science. Learners select their vessel and survey type. They may also select the vessel age, in fact, to represent vessel conditions more accurately. Once on board, virtually, learners put their theoretical and practical training to the test. This metaship experience is highly engaging, so learners interact completely with the vessel throughout the training, inspecting equipment, taking photographs, viewing certificates, documenting notes, and much more. So effectively, it is possible to have spent many training hours on the deck plate of a vessel before even so much as setting foot on the gangplank. Over the years, technology have changed and will continue to change, but we should never forget these technologies are useless without people. It is important, in fact, critical, that we look and make sure that we understand the impact of people in terms of the implementation of new shipboard systems. We need and, in fact, must demand more human-centered frameworks, including prototyping designs using visualization and human-in-the-loop simulations. Finally, we must always remember, and this is very important, that people, not new fuels, new technologies, or even shipboard systems, are going to be the real heroes in our journey through the next industrial revolution marked by decarbonization and digitization. Because at the end of the day, and I think all of you can agree, technology has no sense of humor, no intuition, or no common sense. So they say that once a new technology rolls over you, if you're not part of the steamroller, you're part of the road. So today, as you discuss a lot of issues over the course of this forum, as an industry, we have a choice. Either invest in our people and human-centric decision-making so we can truly harness the potential of all the innovation, or find ourselves all at sea in a world transformed. We must be part of the steamroller, not the road, if we're going to succeed as an industry, because safety really is the ultimate boundary condition. In fact, safety is the mantra of our industry. Safety is both about training and continuous learning of seafarers, as well as providing seafarers with systems and technologies that are intuitive and easy to use. Thank you very much, and I hope you get a chance over the course of the day to discuss, debate, and compare various insights and perspectives with your industry colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christopher. And these are topics around the technology and the people that we're going to be discussing during some of the sessions during the course of today, of course. So don't forget to get involved with that by using our app. Now, to kick us off, to get the ball rolling, so to speak, down that roadway that Christopher wants to roll his steamroller, it gives me great pleasure now to introduce Dag Killen, Head of Research and Senior Advisor at Fearnleys, to do a market outlook for us. I think I spoke to Dag a minute ago. He said he could speak for about 4 hours, 5 hours, if he wanted to, on some of the topics, but he's had to narrow it down so we can stay focused today. Dag, please, the floor is yours.
Where's the okay. So very good morning. We got a big topic to cover in just 20 minutes. As was mentioned here, I could have kept you here all day, just on the slides that I have prepared. But I'm going to jump straight to the first slide. And it's a question I've been asking myself recently. Have we, during the past 50 years, been surrounded, the shipping industry, been surrounded by more chaos than we are currently? We have tariffs, we have wars, we have trade wars, we have sanctions, shadow fleets, etc. And news is full of things pointing in all sorts of directions, especially when it comes to tariffs, because what was proved or believed to be valid about tariffs in the morning is suddenly changed already by dinner time. I think one of the tariffs that was announced from Trump recently had 3 different levels intraday. So someone made like a fun intraday chart of how these tariffs were developing. In all this, there's obviously a lot of noise. And what I'm going to try to do now is to cut through the noise and give you an update on where we are and sort of my assessment on what I believe where we are. If we start off with tariffs, as I said, it's a chaos. What is announced in the morning may not be valid in the afternoon. But bottom line, I think what has been clearly said by President Trump is that he has a fascination of what tariffs did for the American economy about 200 years ago, or what is often referred to as the Gilded Age. Whether it's going to be proven correct or not about that remains to be seen, because the critics would say that it's not really a valid comparison. The US was still a very young economy, natural resources abundant. You had huge immigration, the start of urbanization. You had the railroads, you had the light bulb, you had machinery for manufacturing. You basically had a small industrial revolution. And do we have that now? Yes, we could, of course, say that AI could potentially be this time and this kind of revolution. But the critics would rather point us to basically the 30s and the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930s. That would be sort of the very pessimistic outcome of it, because after that tariff act was implemented, you had nearly 70% decline in US imports and exports, and you created a decade which was called basically the Great Depression. So where are we in this today? I'm not going to speculate because there are pros and cons, but one thing which is pretty clear, if this one worked, is that the Federal Reserve says that tariffs are likely to make inflation a bit stickier than they believed and had hoped. And we've also seen the Federal Reserve start to downgrade the economic development outlook. The container market would typically be a place where we could see effect of a trade war. It's too early though. But what we can say is that it's not necessarily, besides psychology, it's not volumes of containers which is making container rates coming down. Although coming down, they are still at very strong levels, as you can see in a historic context here. Volumes for containers are still growing. It was actually even accelerating up towards Trump coming back into the Oval Office. Whether that was front-running because of all the tariff talk remains to be seen. But this is data that's going to be interesting to see as we come through the summer and we see what kind of tariffs we actually end up having in the market. When rates have been coming off, besides psychology, it's more that the Red Sea diversion, the longer haul, especially for Asia to Europe trade, that effect is now wearing off. It's been around for a while, and you have sort of a delta effect initially, and then it wears off, as I said. And we must not forget that containers is now on the third year of massive supply, very rich fleet supply. So considering that the previous 2 years also had very rich fleet supply, it's quite amazing how well container market has been holding up overall. Not along the lines of tariffs, but port fees. One hot topic recently is based on a report that came out in mid-January, based on an investigation that was launched about a year ago. Hence, it was not a Trump project. However, the topic is probably along the line that Trump would fancy, because it's about reviving US production capacity, manufacturing, and so on. It's about reviving shipbuilding capacity in the US. Now, for those of you who are ship owners, a lot of you have questions, and you are obviously, when you ask the question to me, biased, hoping that this will be implemented. Because what would it create if Chinese-built vessels will be penalized, or even other vessels too, if the owner has other Chinese-built vessels in his fleet? Well, it would create inefficiencies. And what usually end up being the result of inefficiencies is higher earnings. So on the ship owner side, a lot of people are hoping this is going to be implemented. And as I understand, we might know a bit more when we wake up tomorrow morning, as there is a hearing about it these days. Seen from American perspective, higher cost for imports on these kind of vessels would not only be higher freight cost, but it would be an additional fee to pay for importers. And that would mean something that's going to be pushed onward to the consumers. Hence, it could have an inflationary factor in it on the consumer side. At the same time, it would not necessarily be a booster for US exports, because it would mean higher delivery costs. It would take away some of the competitiveness. And none of it is actually, in my opinion at least, doing anything about the structural issue in itself, which is to sort of revive US shipbuilding capacity to be something beyond what Philly and NASCO is producing today. The reason why they are not producing more ships is very simple. It takes longer to build ships in the US compared to in China, and it costs 3 to 4 times more. So I don't see how these fees are actually going to do something about that. So in my opinion, it would be stupid to sort of implement it. It's not going to change the structural issue, although as ship owners, I realize that you would hope so because of the inefficiencies it would create. Speaking of shipbuilding, new building prices have been holding up very well, as you can see on the left side chart. And the reason why they've been holding up very well, the only place we've seen some sort of weakness so far has been on the LNGs coming off a little bit. But then again, that market has ordered a lot and spot-wise is quite depressed at the moment. But the reason is very simple. The order inflow, which you see on the right here, was amazing in 2024. And I think if you had told me the amount of containers that would be ordered in 2024 a year ago, I would have laughed. I would never have believed that containers would go so crazy 3rd, 4th year in a row. Amazing numbers that has been contracted into that sector. Also, on the LNG side, we continue to see, and basically over the past decade, it's the 2nd highest year when it comes to compensated gross tons that has been ordered worldwide. This also means that the yard industry is quite fat and happy, or at least on the backlog side. What you see on the left here is compensated gross tons worldwide by segment. And since 2022, you can see there was an increase in compensated gross tons delivered by the yard industry worldwide in 23, further increase last year. And then there's a bit of a leap to an even greater order book this year. Before 26, 27 is already full, almost to the level of this year's order book. And you can even see that 2028 is coming pretty close, especially if you anticipate a certain amount of slippage. That even 28 is approaching the line, which is the sort of the median of compensated gross tons built over the last 5 years. So what has happened to the backlog? From contracting to delivery of a vessel, we've seen a doubling just in 2 years' time. So the lead time here has increased significantly. Is it going to sort of be a slowdown going forward? Not necessarily. The chart on the right here is showing the gross tons in the merchant fleet overall. The bars are showing the fleet as it's trading today or being on order. The lighter green is the fleet as it was, basically, back in the 90s. So the lighter green are either lost at sea or have been scrapped. What we're moving toward as we approach sort of having a backlog almost up to 2030 already, and then beyond 2030, we're facing a tsunami of replacement requirements. So we definitely need the yard capacity that we have around the world today. But I think a returning issue, which is also supporting prices here, is, as was mentioned by the previous speaker, people. Skilled labor is an increasingly big issue. Not only in Japan, where we've seen the issue for a while, increasingly in Korea, and most recently, even the Chinese, who are 1.4 billion people, are complaining about not having enough skilled labor. So yard capacity might be remaining tight. Heading to geopolitics, there's no time to go in depth here, but I would say that if you look besides sort of ton-mile effects from Russia-Ukraine war, and what is likely a reversal if you have a peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine, I would say a couple of things. One, this conflict, where you have probably seen that there's a potential ceasefire now when it comes to the Black Sea, going from there to having a full peace agreement is a very long distance. We're not even close, and the conflict is very, very complex. It's not only about resources, it's about strategic positioning from both sides and so on. But if you have a peace agreement and Europe start to accept, let's say then oil and gas coming from Ukraine, from Russia again, the effects we would have would predominantly come on 2 segments. One is on the oil tanker side, where Aframax is on the crude side, and the product tankers would take a bit of a beating from contraction of ton miles. The product tankers are now hauling oil products from Russia, much longer distances than to Europe. It's further down to Africa, is South America. Whereas the Aframaxes are hauling the crude oil, the Russian crude oil, to east of Suez, instead of the short distance to Rotterdam and that area. So tankers will have a negative effect from a peace agreement on ton miles. LNG, however, could see some very welcome help when it comes to demand. What you see on the left side here is the percentage of US LNG ending up in different areas, the white area being Europe, the bottom green being Asia. I think if piped gas is starting to pour into Europe again from Russia, you're going to see US LNG being pushed further distance into Asia. And when we add then what is on the right-hand side here, the liquefaction capacity coming on stream towards 2030, you will have a double welcome to the LNG industry. It's going to be tremendous volumes that need to be lifted out of the US, and it's going to be a longer haul for those volumes compared to where we've seen them recently. Another conflict area in geopolitics, we could be talking also about a lot of various sides of sort of the Middle East, but I'm going to stick to the Red Sea here as that's the most direct thing. As you probably noticed, the Houthis have linked their actions very much to the conflict in Gaza. But when it comes to the ceasefire, as you have probably seen, that ceasefire was fragile, it's already broken, and so on. So the Houthis have recently fired a couple of missiles on Israel again. Don't think we've seen any ships being hit recently. But what it's worth having in mind, I believe this situation, the situation about Red Sea and shipping is going to last also until the end of this year. The reason for saying that is it's not only about Gaza. It's also about Yemen domestically. The Houthis are only controlling certain sections of the western part of the country. They are still not controlling Port of Aden. They're still not controlling the oil and gas resources. So they have unfinished business on the domestic home ground. And what did they learn from shooting missiles on ships? Well, it sidelined the official recognized government in Yemen. It gave them a hotline to all the political leaders worldwide. So if they need attention, they know exactly what to do. So the risk is going to be on for ships also, I think, for the remainder of this year. Lastly, about the Yemen and the Red Sea situation is, you've probably seen that the US have had some bombing of Yemen recently. I have never seen a war being won from air. And if you're going to put boots on the ground, I don't think the US would do it. Those who previously tried was the Saudis about 10 years ago. That didn't go well. And before that, I think it was Egypt involving themselves in the civil war in the 60s in Yemen. And that ended up being Egypt's version of what Vietnam War was for the US. So I think this is another conflict which is going to drag on. Should there be a normalization, there are two of the main segments that will have a negative impact on its ton miles. One is on the oil tanker side and specifically on products. On crude side, we haven't really seen a boost from this. The crude oil trade has been more intra-basin, but east to west volumes have continued to flow on product tankers. And if they can start using the Red Sea again, it would lead to a contraction of the ton miles for product tankers. The other segment is obviously containers. Now, these geopolitical events have created some unusual correlations in the tanker space over the last couple of years. What you see here is the various segments of the oil tanker sector. And the lines are basically showing the percentage of the historic averages that we find in each of the boxes, 1 year TC. And what I try to illustrate here is how amazing outperformance is been from Aframaxes and product tankers, especially, compared to the VLCCs, which is the lowest of the lines. Now, as you can see, there's a bit of a return to mean most recently for a number of reasons. But the whole sort of outperformance here, the lack of traditional correlations between tanker segments, has been driven by geopolitics. When it comes to the VLCCs and their underperformance, I would like to sort of address China, because China is very much influencing the VLCC market. And if you start on the right-hand side here, what you can see is that every growth barrel that has been into China recently, in the past couple of years, have been sanctioned barrels. In other words, it's been carried by the shadow fleet, not approved vessels. So this has basically cornered the legal owners of approved vessels on the VLCC space. Another factor which has been a drag for the bigger tankers has been soft oil demand in China in general. When it comes to that soft development in oil demand, some of you were probably here also during APEC last year. And I mean, this softness has created a lot of narratives, and don't buy the narratives. The narrative during APEC week was that LNG trucks are now killing diesel demand in China. If you run the numbers and you sort of say an LNG truck is coming into the market instead of a modern diesel heavy-duty truck, and you take and sort of multiply and run the numbers on 850,000 heavy-duty trucks that exist in China today, you find that the only displacement that has happened on diesel is 140,000 barrels of diesel. It's nothing. And you can also pull up the same on EVs. It's marginal, it's not significant yet. Happy to discuss numbers on that during lunch. But as so often, it's about something else. It's not only the oil market which has been suffering from this. Let's see. To use the slogan from the Clinton campaign in the 90s, is the economy stupid? If you look at steel production in China, cement production in China, it's been soft industrial production in China, and so on. Reason being very, very simple. After COVID, China struggled to come back. It needed to absorb overcapacities across several industries. The biggest excess capacity obviously has been in real estate. Hence, the stimulus talk you've seen over the last 6 months has been very directed at sorting out the real estate market. Why? Because China needs to sort of boost its domestic consumption, and China is and has been facing now approximately the same as Japan did in the early 90s when housing prices started to decline. If you allow them to continue to decline and you don't sort out the mess in the real estate market, consumers stop consuming, they start saving, and they lack the confidence to invest. Hence, China is now focusing a lot on that. And personally, I'm quite encouraged about the outlook for China next year because we are not at equilibrium in that market yet, but we are getting very much closer. So next year for China is looking better. Lastly, there's another segment which is loving to see a strong China. Dry cargo last year started out the year very much stronger than the previous year before Q4 ended up being a very big disappointment. That disappointment continued into the early part of this year before rebounding a little bit over the past months or so. Now, when it comes to what sort of saved them, despite being a relatively soft China also last year, was basically that last year was a stock building year for China. What you see here is the stock buildings, the inventory levels going up for iron ore and coal. And when we have been reluctant to the outlook for dry cargo this year, it's been because last year was a stock building year. What usually comes after is destocking. And when you destock, it usually means that consumption growth is covered by local stocks, not long-haul transportation, and it's a negative for transportation. So we have been anticipating that dry would be a bit of a disappointment this year, but just as the optimism I have on China next year, we could see dry cargo sort of improve again and enjoy a stronger China in 2026 and onward. So with that, my conclusion is basically geopolitics is not going away. It's going to color our industry also this year, cut through the noise and sort of narrow it down because there's a lot of noise around it. Tariffs could be potentially a risk for the US economy as debt levels are very, very high. Europe has, I don't know how to say this in a proper way, but Europe has basically woken up a little bit, I hope, from having been very, very soft for a long time. So Europe could actually come out of a reality check and see some expanding growth going forward. China needs a little bit more time, meaning this year, before we see a more positive China from next year. Shipbuilding capacity remain tight. I'm surprised if the yard industry managed to build a big order book that's on schedule for this year. And the only thing I would say will be different is also that while we had after COVID a synchronized shipping cycle where all the shipping segments had a strong outlook and strong earnings, we're back to what we had after the financial crisis until the pandemic. One segment or two segments at a time are going to perform well. Right now, LNG is already down. With the outlook for supply on containers, it would surprise me if they are not coming down. So you could have sort of counter-cyclical where one segment is performing fantastic, another segment is performing poorly. but that's predominantly based on various very different supply outlooks across the segments. With that, thank you very much.
Dag. Good. So we now have that introduction to the market trends. So that gives me an opportunity then to invite my colleague, Jonathan Boonzaire. He's the Asia Bureau Chief for TradeWinds, to come up. He's going to lead this first discussion session, which is going to take some of those comments that we've probably heard from Dag and analyze them with his panel. But please, Jonathan.
Good. Okay. The session we're having today is going to be on geopolitics. So can my esteemed panel please come up and join me? At least it was empty. I'm going to stand here rather than sit there so that everybody can see them and not have to look at me. Yes, please, if you could sit in your order so that... So if we can have Mark, Dimitris, Martin, Nick, and Caroline. Stop. Musical chairs. So first of all, I would like to thank Doug for his presentation earlier, which saves me from having to read the blurb I wrote about what's going on in the world of geopolitics and how it's affecting shipping. But all I will say is that global trade has been thrust into a new era of heightened volatility and uncertainty, and the ship owners are going to have to navigate their way through it. And I'm going to ask our esteemed panel here of experts to assess the market risks and opportunities while also considering the role that Singapore as a strategic maritime hub can play in all of this in an increasingly fragmented world. So let's start with the Trump trade wars. So the first question I have for the team is, how could Trump's new tariffs and trade restrictions impact global shipping lanes and market flows? And what does the industry need to adapt to these? So who would like to start with that? Let's start from that end. Caroline, do you have anything to say?
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay, great. So we talk about global shipping, and Trump 2.0, for me personally, is a more dangerous era. I think the first time he was a bit shocked that he got elected and he didn't quite know what he was doing. But I think the 2.0 is very clear, and that is dangerous for shipping. I think, you know, when Trump came in, I actually chair the Shipping Policy Committee of ICS, International Chamber of Shipping. And when he came in, 2 weeks later, we had our Shipping Policy Committee meeting, and we actually map out the whole, all the secretaries that are going to affect maritime and how are we going to deal with them, what kind of personalities they have, what kind of views they hold. And USTR Section 301 actually came in about 1-2 years ago, but it went on the quiet. And shortly after our meeting, it came to the fore. And I think this is the one that is going to affect shipping. So Doug said that actually many are hoping that this will come true and that will create inefficiencies. But for global shipping, I think we need to have a global regulatory certainty. And with this uncertainty, I think it will affect shipping in a negative way. And that concerns me. So I think Trump policies with the tariffs When I had the meeting, I had China speaking on their views, US giving us their views, Canada giving us their views, and that was really on the tariff war. But now with Section 301 USTR, and I understand from the sense that in Washington that it will come true, but to what extent we do not know. So that is the one that is going to impact shipping the most.
Okay, thank you, Caroline. And sorry, I forgot to introduce people on my panel properly. Caroline is president of the Singapore Shipowners Association, and she's also chief executive of Singaporean tanker company Hong Lam Marine. And then sitting next to Caroline is Nick Brown, CEO of Lloyd's Register. And then we have Martin Kroger, who is CEO of the German Shipowners Association, VDR. And we have Dimitris Belbas, who's Managing Director and Head of Shipping Finance at CFIN. And Mark Cameron, who is Managing Director for Asia and Chief Operating Officer of Ardmore Shipping. So carrying on with that question, Nick, do you have anything to say on that?
I agree with Caroline. Generally, what shipping needs is global regulation. We are amazingly efficient as an industry to serve the world's trade needs and growth needs. And it's hard to see how any kind of national or regional policy is going to support efficiencies. It's likely the opposite. Certainly from the conversations that I'm having with ship owners, I'm not sure they're all looking forward to this, to be honest. So I'm not sure I can agree with Dag, but I can sort of see your argument, Dag. But I think a lot of people are concerned. It adds more uncertainty about the future on top of all of the uncertainty that we have seen really since the pandemic. And I think it's just causing a lot of stakeholders in the industry just to pause and not make investment decisions as a result because of that extra uncertainty that it's creating. So I think we're in for an interesting 6 months because, as you know, Doug has already covered very well, what happens with the Red Sea and whether we have sustained peace in the Red Sea, whether we have a route towards peace between Russia and Ukraine, and what happens with US and China relations or lack of relations, all have a huge impact on us as an industry and the critical investment decisions we need to be making between now and 2030. The only other thing I would add is we have an immense lump of tonnage that was delivered during the last shipbuilding boom of 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10. All ships delivered probably before 2011 with older technology engines that are hard to upgrade, and those ships are heading towards 20 years of age as we come to 2030. So there are some real key decisions to be made in the next 5 years, which will impact, I think, our overall ability to reach anything close to net zero by 2050.
Okay, thank you. Martin, do you have any comments?
Yeah, of course. I mean, most of it has already been said. I believe the worst case is the new normal, at least from a European perspective, where you have like half of the world fleet is concentrating in Europe these days. And if I look at the impact that the new US policy is going to have, is most probably the deepest impact will be on the exporters situated in the US, right? So on the imports, if you are a container liner company, you can of course like reshuffle your routes that you take. You can reshuffle your port calls. You most probably won't call at the small ports anymore in the US if you have to pay for every port call a fee up to $1.5 million, right? So you concentrate on the larger ports and then basically reshuffle your network and try to arrange your Chinese built ships maybe in another company that doesn't call the US ports. But having said that, this whole proposal that is on the table now is so unclear because it hasn't even defined who the operator of a vessel is. So we don't really know yet the concrete impact. We have to await the outcome of the hearings, which are up and running in the moment. But then again, I mean, shipping is not only containers, right? So if I look at the cheaper commodities like grain, or I mean, the US is the biggest grain exporter in the world, right? Also the biggest LPG exporter. And those we calculate are going to see the biggest hits price-wise, which is up to plus 30% of the prices that you're going to pay as an exporter. And that basically takes you out of competition. Because you're competing on grain, you're competing with Brazil, for example, just to name one, and they will have much cheaper prices when it comes to exports. So in the end, the US is hitting its own exporters with this proposal, which is obviously not good. But shipping-wise, I believe to a certain extent we can rearrange. But then again, if you look at how dominant China is these days in shipbuilding, with well, overall sectors, it's about 60%, bit over 60% of new shipbuilding activities in China. In container ships, it is over 70% that are coming from Chinese yards. So it's a very, very difficult exercise to actually rearrange and block China out of the market. But it gives me comfort that only about 18% of world trade is actually with the United States, right? So there is a lot more trade out there in the world. It's not all focused on the United States. But of course, it has a severe and very deep impact. And this unplannability is, I think, one of the biggest problems. So we need certainly first on the regulation, we need to see what's coming out of the US now. And if it is actually impacting Chinese-built ships, which have already been built. But that is something nobody can answer in the moment. We have to wait and see for the results from the hearing.
Okay, good. Thank you. Very insightful points. Dimitris.
Yeah. Good morning to all of you. Thank you for the invitation. I have to admit, we had a quick chat just before we started on why are we invited on this geopolitical panel, the very beginning of the day. I know why I am invited. I will tell you. Last year's event, Suan, the moderator of the panel about financing, asked, what is it that we don't see in the horizon? What is it that, we don't take into account? And I had that brilliant idea to reply by saying 5th of November, 2024, which was the day of the US elections. If Trump gets elected, all bets are off, buckle up. So I think I paid the price now for saying last year that were President Trump being re-elected, we'll be sitting here trying to understand.
Give him a round of applause.
What's going on? No. Now, during her adventures in Wonderland, Alice meets the White Queen, who tells her, I can think 6 impossible things before breakfast. So today, I got everybody's attention now, okay? I tried before having breakfast to think of 6 impossible things to share with you today. Tariffs, deportations, low inflation, low interest rates, world peace, and a 2-term president. I will agree with Martin, okay? There are so many things going on. I think we have a major wave of disruption right now in the US, possibly going into disorder. A lot of people have put pencils down. They are waiting to see what is going to happen. And I think a lot of ship owners are taking the same stance, waiting, and we'll hear from Mark, to see how things will plan out. When the dust settles, what would that mean for our industry? Mark.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. Let me start by saying we don't have any Chinese tonnage. So on the one hand, we might be looking forward a little bit to the opportunity that Dag was referring to. But if the 2-tier market does develop along the lines you were talking about, opportunities will exist for some of us. Okay, let's put the optimism aside. It's a 4-year term. If we know anything about the previous Trump administration, we know that they will course correct and they will change, and he does have a base of support amongst his constituents for what he's doing and the approaches that he's taking. So on the one hand, whilst they may course correct after a short period, and history in Trump land has a very short tenure, I think you may certainly get the inefficiencies that were being talked about. But if anybody has been in China recently, I think you'll see the complete opposite. You'll see that China has invested in efficiencies right throughout their system. If you go to the airports, you drive along their roads, you look at the rail network, and you look at the harbor efficiency. China is geared up for a new world of total efficiency. And whilst, yes, the housing market and crisis that was pointed out earlier in China is certainly a reality, the investments that they've put into the road network to get products to the ports so that the road jams have been taken out, and the environmental improvements that they've done is nothing short of astounding. And the narrative, of course, that we hear from the West particularly is that, just China's doom and gloom. And it suits a certain narrative to paint China in that way. And I think the fear that they're sort of generating through this is a bit of a smokescreen for the reality that we're going to see, is that China's dominance and its rightful place in the world order will actually be quite a catalyst for improvement. And it certainly will be beyond, as Chris was saying, a decade of change. It's going to be much longer than that. And I think that there are positivities that are going to come out there that we haven't actually really thought about yet or understood how we can yield that.
Okay, thank you. Now, one of the things that, taking the China theme a bit further, we've all noticed, those of us living here in Asia, that China has become slightly more bellicose towards Taiwan. So I want to ask the panel, there are a lot of analysts, usually in the US, who are predicting that Trump's comments to take back the Panama Canal, annex Canada, along with his cozying up to Vladimir Putin, may embolden China to invade Taiwan. If such an event occurs, I'd like to ask the panel, what impact would it have on Asian shipping markets? Now, I have been informed in advance that certain panel members are not able to comment on this, so I'm just going to open it up voluntarily to anyone who would like to answer.
I mean, the question is it really going to be an invasion? Is the worst case scenario for shipping, is that an invasion, or is it more like a quarantine kind of scenario where China might, approach certain shipping companies saying, look, if you're going into Taiwan again, I'm going to block you off from Chinese ports. And, if you do that with the major liner companies, except maybe Evergreen, then shipping will have a severe problem. And the second scenario might not be a quarantine scenario, but a blocking of the Taiwan Strait, or the adjacent waters of Taiwan, and that would of course be a major disruption to shipping, because you have it's one of the most important sea lanes that we have on this planet, where basically every single container that comes from China going either to U.S. East Coast or Europe is going through. And if you block that strait, then adjacent the South China Sea, then of course you have a super big problem in shipping. But what I found interesting, it's kind of related, is these security leaks that were in the news over the past 2 days in the United States, where Vice President Vance said, I hate to bail out Europe again with our military action in the Red Sea. Now, it's not European ship owners that are going through the Red Sea, right? It's the Chinese carriers which are still going through unharmed and not being shot at by the Houthi rebels. So whom are you actually bailing out, right? Because our networks have adapted. We have adapted with a 2 weeks extra sailing time around the Cape of Good Hope and everything. So shipping has, hardly seen any disruption with at least the supply chains with the military action by the Houthi rebels we saw on the Red Sea. So it's interesting to see the take of the US, or the misunderstanding how shipping actually works in the US. And the big question, of course, will be, How is the US going to react if we see military or blockage action around Taiwan? And if they're going to bail out and say, we're not interested in the geopolitical situation anymore, then you are discussing a completely different landscape and scenario for shipping than if they would engage military.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Maybe just to offer, I think if we know anything about China is they have a long game. They don't play the short game. So their plan for Taiwan will have been researched and worked out long in advance of this. And I think if they are going to take it, they will have game played every scenario, and they will know how to react. And I think the language that I'm certainly hearing when I'm visiting China is a lot more loud around their intentions than soft pedaling it. I think there was a time where it suited them to be sort of soft pedaling their views, but now there's definitely a little more socialization of it in open circles.
And what sort of things are they saying in open circles?
You know, wouldn't be surprised kind of language. I did read a statistic that I believe Taiwan has 7 days of LNG supply. And if you want to really take Taiwan, you could consider just blockading the LNG imports, and the energy infrastructure in the country would be damaged or reduced, and therefore, you know, you would have a much easier inroad. And of course, the inhospitability of the coastline of Taiwan means that your air infrastructure would need to be, you know, your manner of invasion, if you like. So I think watching the LNG side is a really important sort of, again, catalyst for information.
Okay, good. Thank you. Dimitris?
Yeah, I think when I made the comment last May about 5th of November and Trump being re-elected, I never thought that we would be speaking publicly, loudly, about that kind of a scenario. And I will say I'm really concerned from a personal standpoint. My wife's Taiwanese. My 2 daughters are Taiwanese. We have family in Taiwan. So when we're talking about China invading Taiwan, it becomes extremely personal for people who have families there and the people living there. Just to think about it, it's extremely scary, but we have reached the stage where now we voice and we talk about the unthinkable. Putting that aside, okay, I will agree, obviously, with Mark about China's long game. We were very privileged for the people who were present during the opening ceremony of the Maritime Week to listen to, you know, Senior Minister Li Xielong talking about, you know, trade in China and the US. And it reminded me of a book that was published a couple of years later about the late Lee Kuan Yew and his thoughts about China. He was a trusted advisor of a lot of US administrations and European prime ministers, where he said that China will reclaim its #1 position in Asia, and why not in the world. They will do it very carefully, and they will rise peacefully in the next 30, 40, 50 years. They will not try to create tension until they are ready. Now, I tried to see, the book was published in 2020. I tried to see when exactly he said it. I wasn't able to find it, because if you start going back the numbers, when was the 30, 40, 50 years that he mentioned? And when do they come, you know, into, you know, fruition? And my, if you want, contribution to this question is the following. What if the US administration actually read the advice and said, where is the 30, 40, 50 years? If we cannot stop them by 50 years, we should stop them now. And obviously the Canada administration, with what they have said about Panama, Greenland, Canada, okay, doesn't give you any actual confidence that if a country far away is under attack or under, you know, blockade, or under, if you want, any sort of, you know, embargo from a superpower, you know, challenging, you know, the supreme kind of, you know, leader, how will they behave? What will Korea do? What will Japan do? What will Australia do? What would they think? Like it suddenly, the whole, not can of worms, it's like, a huge VLCC full of worms opens up and everything is off. Like if 5th of November 2024, all bets are off, in such a scenario, I don't think we'll be talking about it so calmly right now. And what will be, I'm sorry, Caroline, what will be Singapore's stance in something like that? Okay, like it's unthinkable, but we are here today. We are thinking and we are talking about the unthinkable.
Thank you, Dimitris. And you put me right into my next question. And that involves Singapore. This is the Singapore Shipowners Forum. And that's how can Singapore maintain its position as a neutral global shipping hub amidst rising tensions between the world's two largest economies, which are China and the US? Caroline, do you think you could start the answer on that one?
Yeah, perhaps I will. Singapore has always been very careful to stay as a neutral country. And this neutrality actually permeates at all levels of the government and also even at the trade associations. We are all very mindful of this neutrality. And this neutrality actually stays with us. It's actually quite inside our DNA. And so when we go to ASEAN, when we go to ASEAN Shipowners Association, when we go to Asian Shipowners Association, and even in the international forum of the International Chamber of Shipping, we are neutral because we are very mindful that we are small and that we need to be open. So with all these tensions, we are concerned. We are concerned how it's going to impact us. So I think for us is just to do what we can with what we know and have a very keen eye on what's happening. And I like to believe that Singapore is very agile and very adaptable. And we are not like 50, 60 years ago. We're celebrating our 60th birthday. We are in a stronger position. Our people are talented. Our rules are clear. We are very pro-business. We listen to everyone and we adapt and we run faster than anyone. I think that's how we stay relevant.
Okay, thank you, Caroline.
Maybe I can just add, I think also we can see that in action this week.
Oh, yes.
If we think about the critical discussions going on at IMO and MEPC next week, all of the preparation for that is being hosted by Singapore, where we are trying to find some middle ground such that we can actually get a global midterm measure. And I think it's because Singapore is open, welcomes everybody, has a convening power, I think, which is quite difficult to match. And you've proven that you can bring together different perspectives and try to find middle ground. And I think that's happening at IMO, and it's happening, I think, more broadly from a trade perspective as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to add anything? No? Great. Before I continue with the questions, there is the app. So if you have any questions that you're dying to ask, please put your questions in and we can look at it. At the moment, I have none from you. If you're not a techie app kind of person, later on, put your hand up. We can get to you as well. I'm going to sort of target some of our panelists here more specifically. I'm going to start with our Shipowner Association presidents. Martin, what are the three biggest concerns troubling your members at the moment?
I think the one that we just discussed is right on top of the agenda, right? Geopolitics and regulative uncertainty. That also goes for the European regulations in conjunction with the international measures that are upcoming on decarbonization especially. We saw like emission trading system being installed in Europe, not only in Europe, right? We got 4 countries in the world which have their own emission trading systems. It's Djibouti, Turkey, UK, and the EU. All different requirements, all different reporting requirements, which of course makes our life very, very difficult as ship owners. So that is something that we deal with like on a daily basis, I would say, this regulative uncertainty that we are facing in all sorts of areas. Decarbonization, of course, has been around for the last decade, I would say, right on top of the agenda, and it's still same importance, I would say, equaling the geopolitical tense situation. And attracting talent to shipping is another important point. How do you actually get the next generation to join our beautiful industry? And that is, of course, a major challenge. At least, like if I look at Germany or in Europe, we have a declining population, and the Generation Z, how we call it, is like not interested in moving abroad for 6 months on a vessel and not being home, hardly having access to internet, all that kind of stuff. And that's what, our association gets engaged in quite heavily to inform how the reality on a ship actually looks like, and that it is a good job and that you actually have internet access on the vessels nowadays. So I'd say those are the 3 top topics in the moment. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I know that at this stage of the game, a lot of people in this Singapore Maritime Week are suffering from what somebody once described as decarbonization information overload syndrome. I think that was Esben Poulsen who came up with that expression. But Martin brought that up. So actually, I was going to ask the whole panel, with all the geopolitical events going on right now, do you think it's going to accelerate or decelerate decarbonization efforts in Singapore? In shipping, sorry, not just Singapore.
So maybe I'll start. So just to follow up on Martin, what concerns me today, and it will bring in the decarbonization part. We have been in the downturn for 12 years since the GFC. And we didn't see the light at the end of the tunnel for a long time. And 2025 is expected to be a good year for the shipping industry. So we have actually 6 very good years. And we should be heading for a downturn, technically, because shipping is cyclical. But we were assisted by the pandemic, and then we were assisted by the wars, the disruptions, and the volatility. So if you ask me, with all this geopolitics, Nick was saying just now, it prevents people from making investment decisions. And when people don't make investment decisions, there will be no progress. People will keep their money. We will have to keep cash because firstly, we should be technically going into a downturn, that's one, but we are in a stronger position compared to the GFC time. The second thing is that with geopolitics, with decarbonization, we don't know what to invest. So we keep our money, and that is not good for the economy. That worries me. That's one. And I was saying to Dimitris just now, we talk about decarbonization and we invest so much in decarbonization because we were doing well. We had money. But if we go to the downturn, and if I take the parallels of when I went into a downturn, survival was key. Everything was out of the window. I was just trying to make sure that my ship charter rates could pay my bank, could pay my OPEX. So if you ask me, I am concerned from 2026 onwards. I am concerned.
Thank you. Dimitris.
Yeah, if I can add to Caroline's comment. Last year's panel, I think just before stepping down, there was already online on the TradeWinds website, okay, Dimitris Spelbas said, everybody has money. Okay, so I hope they will not quote me that quickly. Okay, but it's very interesting. I was going through the agenda and the speakers, and if I'm not mistaken, there's not a single banker invited to talk today, and I haven't seen anyone, in the delegates. So I think I will echo what Caroline said and repeat last year's comment. Everybody has money right now. The owners, one of them sitting next to me, okay, have money. The banks have money. The alternative lenders have money. Investors have money. There are not that many projects to deploy. I think this is what we are seeing, and people are taking a wait-and-see approach. Too much uncertainty for them to make a calculated, if you want, investment decision. Okay. Back to your question, Jonathan. In the projects we are involved in, and I'm very concerned about what could be potentially quoted out of context. Okay. The ESG element is not very high on the list. I think people are looking for projects, full stop. If they're green, even better. Full stop.
Thank you.
Mark.
Yeah. I think capital allocation is always important in any company that you're running, and I think certainly speaking for our business, we take a very long-term look at capital allocation. Of course, we've paid down debt; we're debt-free, as are many ship owners now. But fleets are aging, and we have to be considering, what is the appropriate inflection point in both prices, second-hand or new builds, to consider, an optimum time to go back into the market. It's difficult right now, so it certainly is. But I think the capital allocation policy and paying back dividends, shipping's had a good run over the past couple of years, and I think investors have started to enjoy sort of the fruits of the upturn that Caroline was referring to. But I think the word that we're sort of using internally for ourselves is not just about decarbonization, it's more about innovation. And I think we're welcoming the broader kind of view that innovation sort of brings to the opportunities that we see. It is true that the world is taking a very different approach towards ESG, and Dimitris is right there in terms of just how the language of ESG has moved from opportunity to perhaps a bit of greenwashing, so risk, and now into green hushing, which is, of course, let's not talk about that anymore, which is kind of a Western sort of theme. I think certainly within Europe, that's not necessarily the case. But I heard someone say the other day that democracy might not be good for decarbonization. And if you think about that, it's, the politics of decarbonization is at play in the global stage. And if you think about Europe at the moment, where the political agenda lies, it's no longer really with the Greens. It's about, many other things. But I do think if you look at China, and you look at their decarbonization strategy, it's incredible. It's actually what we all want to be doing is just understanding how they are able to create a market when the rest of us politically seem to battle. But I do think that shipping, to pick up on the point again that Chris was talking about earlier, the professionalism that's attached to seafarers is, I think, a really misunderstood concept. Because although we talk about great lofty ideas about how we're going to train all these seafarers, I think we have no idea what's coming down the track at us in terms of technology and the importance of training seafarers and retaining them. And if I can predict one thing, I will say that the amount of poaching of seafarers that's going to go on from one company to another, those who can afford to train and those who can afford to train properly, and you're going to create pipelines, not just like we saw in the LNG era, where we had to train an enormous amount of people quickly. Now you're going to be training people in very, very different disciplines. And let's remember, on the backdrop of that, seafarers don't get shore leave. The reality of the world that they are in is that they're unwelcome people around the world. And that's really sad when we talk about these highly trained, highly skilled individuals who we treat like crap. And there's an importance. The Mission to Seafarers is doing an enormous amount of work at the moment to try to get ports to open up, to actually allow them to go ashore. So that's the dichotomy of the industry that we live in.
Thank you. And we will be discussing the seafarer question after lunch. So we will look at that in greater detail.
Jonathan, I'm sorry. I would like to apologize and correct myself. I see fellow, friends from the banking industry and the leasing industry on the group. So apologies. They are here. They are present. Okay, find them in the, during the break.
But maybe, I mean, mentioning banks, maybe the banks are not the problem, right, when it comes to decarbonization.
Never.
Because you're right, the money is out there. But the question is, where is it, right? Because we pay such a high amount of money into emission trading systems, for example. What happens to that money? Right? Does it return to the sector? Well, answer is clearly not, because for the time being, at least in the European Union, when you look at the European emission trading system, the money is kept by the member states and giving out to any decarbonization measure, not concentrating on shipping, but anything. So the question is, why do you suck money out of the sector and then not give it back for research and development or the whole decarbonization project of shipping? That is a question that still needs to be answered. Is that the right way forward? And I would say it's probably not, because if you want shipping to decarbonize fast, you've got to give back the money and trust the sector to actually use it for decarbonization projects. But this uncertainty that you create, that is actually, from my perspective, that is the actual difficulty when it comes to decarbonizing shipping, right? And also the uncertainty you create with certain regulative landscapes, it's just not helping much. And I don't know if you've read the news that BP is dropping out of alternative fuels, refocusing on normal fuels. I mean, what is that? What kind of uncertainty is that? What sign do you give to the shipping sector if the fuel suppliers are actually not ready to supply our ships with the fuels that we need? We are ready. We made our homework. And if you look at the new building activity when it comes to alternative fuels, it is looking very positive.
Yeah, well, I talk to a lot of ship owners who are looking at the alternative fuels, and they're okay with the alternative fuels. Their concern is the supply.
Yeah,
exactly. So that's that.
Exactly.
Nick?
No, I was just going to add exactly that point. I think if you think back just how much progress we've made as an industry to make zero emission capable ships, a reality. I mean, they're under construction. Some of them are in service. Some of them will be delivered in the coming years across the whole portfolio of fuels. They're all dual fuel, of course, because no one is quite rightly brave enough to build a ship today that can operate on only a new alternative fuel. I think our real concern is when you see the international oil companies, and it's not just BP, there's quite a number of them, that are not being rewarded by their investors and their share prices reflecting it when they invest in renewable fuel projects. So the real concern, I think, and I'm not sure this is actually just driven by geopolitics, I think it's also driven by investor sentiment, is that there doesn't seem to be a clear path to profit.
So you mean we can't blame it on Donald Trump then entirely?
I think I think some of this was going on well before recent elections in the US, and I think you can see it in share prices with the international oil companies. I agree with Mark, however. I was in China 2 weeks ago, and if you see the progress that is being made to reduce the cost of solar and wind and the scale at which it's being deployed, not just in China, but Chinese technology being deployed in many parts of the world, we are going to see the basic building block that we need for all of this, not just our fuel, but the fuel that hopefully we'll be carrying for customers around the world who want to use clean energy. We're seeing that basic building block, which is a cheap, clean electron, really coming down in price. And it just takes massive scale. And if anybody can do it, it will be Chinese technology and the deployment of it in many parts of the world.
So in that case, what sort of role do you think the Chinese shipyards can play, despite the whole fragmented and politicized global supply chain now? What do you think role do you think they can play in helping to bring that scale of decarbonization, the alternative fuels and such, to the world shipping industry?
Basically, the role they've been playing for the last few years. I think everybody knows. You just look at the scale and the volume of orders that were secured by Chinese shipyards in the last few years. They have been the factory for the world for some time, and it looks increasingly like, from a maritime perspective, it's going to be hard to see how the next generation of vessels and today's generation of vessels are not going to be upgraded without the support of repair yards, dry docks, technology, design, and ultimately new ship construction coming from China.
Okay, thank you. Caroline,
Yes.
did I get you to give me in a nutshell the three main concerns that the Singapore Shipowners Association members are concerned about?
The Singapore Shipping Association, I think, as what Martin said, of course, how decarbonization is going to affect the shipping sector. Singapore has a very strong view that they want to go net zero by 2050. It's a whole of government decision, and that comes down to shipping. They have certain policies. For the Shipping Association is that must not affect the competitiveness of Singapore as a port. And decarbonization is expensive, and it really does require all hands on deck. And that means the support from the government, the charterers willing to pay the charter rates. I must tell you, that's not what I'm seeing, and the bankers needs to come in. I've always said that in the past, it has always been in the industry building the ships and the bankers supporting that industry. But what I've seen the last few years is that the bankers telling the industry what ships to build, and that's to me quite a dangerous path to go. So on that part, decarbonization, digitalization, I feel we are at a very good momentum, and of course geopolitics. Someone asked me what is the one word that I worry in 2025, and I said geopolitics. Every morning I wake up with trepidation when I read the papers. So that is our big concern. Now, actually, the third one that is very local to us is the cost of living. Maritime Singapore is, by its very nature, international. We don't have a domestic hinterland. And we want to make sure that we are competitive, and we want to make sure that this is a country that we can attract the best talent. And it has to be the best talent regardless of where you come from. So we should be agnostic. We just want to attract the best and brightest. And how do we make sure that this is a cost-effective place, a good place for you to bring your family here?
Thank you. We're starting to run short on time, so I'm going to finish my individual questions. Dimitris, I'm going to pick on you. U.S. President Donald Trump has promised to make American shipbuilding great again. I can see you rolling your eyes there. From the perspective of a financier, what does he need to do for that to happen? And would CFIN be willing to play a part in that?
Lovely. Yeah. Listen, historically, in the long run, there has not been a major naval power that hasn't been a maritime power at the same time, like commercial shipbuilding capability together with an ocean-going fleet. The US was the champion in building ships during the Second World War, when they were able to build 2,700 ships, starting from 244 days down to 5 days, less than 5 days, the so-called Liberty ships. Why I'm mentioning that is because the US, the policies right now discussed, and I'm sure Mr. Wernicke will know better than I do, okay, discussed right now in the White House, in the Congress, are actually compared to the Liberty project, which is unimaginable a couple of months ago. Now, that said, the US is building a lot of ships. These are Navy ships. I tried to go on Google's AI, Gemini, and I said, what are the time delays in the US Navy's new building order book? And it gave me a whole list of points, but it didn't give me a number. Then I changed US with PLA, People's Liberation Army in China, and it came with a very short answer. Okay, like, we believe there must be some delays, but we don't see them. According to a recent report, and again, I stand to be corrected, okay, the delays are from 1 to 3 years. The budget overrun is, the latest one is like 46%.
This is US.
These US Navy new building orders, okay? Will they go into commercial shipbuilding? I will say that they have to, if they want to be the dominant maritime power in the world, protecting the sea lines. They will have to, eventually build their own ships like they used to. And I think interestingly, I see articles on the Financial Times this week again and again and again talking about shipbuilding potentially being President Trump, okay, major contribution to the US manufacturing policy. Again, we have experts here, and it would be good to hear what they think. Now, let me answer your question. Okay, that was my introduction. And we have lawyers here, plenty of them, so we should take their input during the break. Assuming we can deal with the permissible delays on the new building contract, assuming we are okay with the budget overruns during the construction of the ship, and assuming the charterer is there to pay, okay, whatever the owners require as a return on their investment. I've spoken to our group CFO, group CEO, and I'm happy to say that we will offer our financing services pro bono to that project. Okay, we will do it for free. Okay, assuming that ship is delivered and people take possession of it, we will do it for free. Okay.
Okay, thank you. The offer's out there on the table. You know who to contact if you want to build a US
Mark,
ship.
would you place an order?
I'm
Yeah,
doing nothing for free.
Mark, Ardmore Shipping has its fleet in both Europe and Asia. With all that's going on in the world right now, which one of those two regions do you think is going to offer the most potential growth, Asia or Europe?
I should say also we're in Houston too. We have an office in Houston. I think anybody who's in the international liquid bulk market, such as we are, you have to have a foot in each of those regions. You cannot overplay one to the other. You have to have the versatility to move your fleet around, and you have to have relationships in each of those regions, and you have to have market presence. And I think the importance for us is to be nimble in your decision making, and that you can have your forward crystal ball vision, but it has to be grounded in local reality. So I would say a presence in each location is vital. Relationships are key, and being nimble in your decision making allows you to react quickly to opportunities that arise.
Great. Thank you. Now, I was told I had 50 minutes. We're now at 49 minutes and 16 seconds. Nobody has submitted a question. Does anyone in the audience have a question? Speak now, forever hold your peace. Great. In that case, I'm happy to say I am one of those lucky moderators who doesn't hold people up from their lunch. So let's give a big round of applause for this panel. And my personal thanks to you all for giving such insightful answers. And we need a picture.